These are devotions for people at a social distance. Every day, mid-morning, I have a bit of a ritual. I take a moment out of whatever I'm doing and I check in on the statistics for COVID-19 that are released on a daily basis for Ontario. And as the numbers of cases go up and down, my mood might rise or fall. Probably not an uncommon kind of ritual that people have these days. And of course, I have rejoiced greatly to see in the last week or so how those numbers of new cases have remained almost every day under 200, how hospitalizations continue to go down, how the number of deaths continue to go down. It's good news, all things relative, of course, but it is good news to see the way in which things are going. At the same time, I am often horrified these days to see the news coming out of many parts of the United States as case numbers in some states, Arizona, California, Texas, Florida, I think, are just sort of going crazy or ballooning. And it is very disturbing and indeed frightening to see what's going on there. And you kind of rejoice at times like that to know that there is a political border between us and them, and that border is closed to non-essential traffic. What should we be thinking about that? Should we rejoice that we're doing relatively well as somebody else is doing not so well? Obviously not. Should we feel a certain schadenfreude, a bit of rejoice at the misfortune of others, knowing that, some of their problems are stemming from, some of the political issues they've had, some of the social issues and division that they have suffered with, makes us feel better, makes us feel maybe as if we are better than them. Doesn't quite seem to be the right attitude, does it? So I maybe feel that temptation to have that attitude to rejoice in the misfortune of our neighbors to the south. But clearly, that's not what we ought to be doing. I'm reading today from Romans chapter 12, starting in verse 3. For by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think of yourself more highly than you ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned. Now, I realize that Paul is writing that to people in a church in Rome who, are maybe tempted to think very much on an individual basis, well, I'm better than you. And sure, that certainly applies to our personal relationships. I think it can also apply to relationships between nations. The whole point of reflecting on the nature of an international relationship is not to exalt ourselves over others. And he goes on for the reason why in verse 4, for as in one body we have many members, and not all members have the same function. He's saying the reason why you don't exalt yourself over others is because we're all connected. And of course, that is true as individuals in the church, but it's also very much true as nations today. And as that country to the south of us deals with its problems and issues, there is no question that they will affect us. We are all connected, and like it or not, we are all in this together. So I hope you will join me in praying for the United States. They're going through a really rough time right now. Let's lift them up. Gracious God, some of the things that are going on in the United States in the pandemic and in other unrest and difficulty and political struggles, they need grace, they need hope, and they need healing. Help us to not think only of ourselves in this troubled world. Help us to think of others and what we can do for them. And I pray for healing and hope for that country at a very difficult time. Amen.